My name is Sanne van der Lugt, and I'm an Associate Fellow with LeidenAsiaCentre and also an Associate Fellow with Klingendahl Institute in The Hague. And my research is on China-Africa relations, with a specific focus on Chinese economic activities on the African continent and how they influence life in Africa. I've been working as a researcher at the Center for Chinese Studies at Stellenbosch University, and in that role I could conduct fieldwork in many different African countries. And there I realized that the countries that I visited, the Africans know quite well what they can get or cannot get out of the relations with their Chinese counterparts. And the Chinese are actually getting more and more familiar with the African continent. But it are the Europeans and the Americans that do not often have a clue about the ins and outs of the China-Africa relations, because they are blinded by very strong negative assumptions regarding these Chinese activities in Africa. Most research on the Belt and Road Initiative, or the new Silk Road, is focusing on the two components of the Belt and Road Initiative. On one hand, the Belt, which is referring to the trade routes overland, and the road, which is funnily enough referring to the maritime trade routes. My research is focusing on a third component of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is the digital Silk Road. The digital Silk Road is composed of cross-border optical cables, which are used to transfer data. So you can think of internet, telecommunications, digital TV, but also of transcontinental maritime optical cables. These cables are connecting the internet networks between the different continents, and also satellites. And with satellites, we also have to think of spatial information like GPS. Through the digital Silk Road, the Chinese government aims to build their own transnational infrastructure network. From a Chinese perspective, this digital Silk Road is bridging the gap between, on the one hand, the developed West, and on the other hand, the developing countries, by enhancing the capacities of these developing countries. From the Western perspective, the Chinese are exporting their surveillance technologies and their strictly controlled internet to authoritarian regimes. However, what we tend to forget then is the agency of the receiving countries, and that is what my research is focusing on. I'm focusing on East Africa, and now specifically Ethiopia. For this research, I will conduct 2 weeks fieldwork in Ethiopia, funded by the LeidenAsiaCentre. And I'm planning to look at the local actors, what are their motives for the digitalization of their country, and also what is their influence in steering this process. Ethiopia is linked to the Belt and Road Initiative via Djibouti, a very strong economic partner of China, and recently decided to digitalize the country with the help of Chinese technologies. The former Ethiopian government has been considered by the West as an authoritarian regime and is accused of using Chinese technologies for surveying, controlling, and spying on their own citizens. However, China is not unique in selling surveillance technologies to the Ethiopian government, because the Ethiopian government also bought surveillance technologies from, for example, Israel, Italy, and the UK. So the more general question is then, will the digitalization of Ethiopia benefit Ethiopia in general, or will it more be a tool for an authoritarian government to control its citizens? One aspect of the geopolitical context we have to take into consideration for this research is the current fight that is going on between China and the US for leadership of the fourth industrial revolution. In history, it has been the case that whoever was the leader of the industrial revolution also became the world leader. The Chinese government has with Huawei the best chances to become the leader in the fourth industrial revolution. That is why the US tries to discredit and also slow down Huawei in order to defend their leadership position. Another aspect that we have to take into account is that historically Europeans have been perceiving the African continent as their backyard and now see China as a newcomer, a threat to their position in Africa. We have to see the critique that the West has towards these Chinese tech companies in Africa, therefore also in this light. although I did not start my fieldwork yet, I did find that the Ethiopian government also bought surveillance technologies from Italy, Israel, and the UK during the preparations for my research. And I did surprise some European policymakers who had a very negative attitude towards the digitalization of Ethiopia with Chinese support. I do actually expect to find more agency and also well-thought strategies from the Ethiopian government than is often expected from a European perspective. But we will see.